The story begins in secrecy. In 1953, the United States government quietly declared a war. This was not a war of soldiers and tanks, fought on foreign soil with guns and bombs. It was a silent, internal conflict waged against the very essence of human consciousness. The Central Intelligence Agency, the nation's shield in the shadows, began a top-secret program. The codename MKUltra. The stated goal was deceptively simple, yet monumentally cruel. They sought to understand and ultimately to master the levers of the human mind. They wanted to find a way to control thought, to erase memory, to break the will of any person they chose. This was not a quest for knowledge. It was a quest for absolute power over the individual. The program was born from the paranoia of the Cold War. American intelligence officials grew deeply fearful that their adversaries, the Soviets, the Chinese, the North Koreans, had developed sophisticated methods of brainwashing. The CIA decided it could not afford to fall behind in this new, invisible arms race. To them, the human mind was the next battlefield. And so, with a chilling sense of urgency, they launched a sprawling, clandestine effort to develop their own arsenal of mind control techniques, no matter the ethical cost or the human toll. This endeavor was not a small, isolated project. It was a vast and complex network of experiments, reaching into the most trusted corners of American society. The CIA funneled money through front organizations and foundations, masking its involvement from the very institutions it was using. They enlisted the help of doctors, psychologists, neuroscientists, and even magicians, all tasked with exploring the darkest frontiers of mental manipulation. The program operated without oversight, without accountability, and for 2 decades, without the knowledge of the American public or most of its elected representatives. At the helm of the CIA when MKUltra was conceived stood Allen Dulles, a formidable and well-connected figure, the agency's first civilian director. Dulles was a product of the Cold War's iciest years, a man who saw the world in stark terms: us versus them. He believed the United States was locked in an existential struggle against a ruthless and godless communist enemy. In this high-stakes game of global chess, he thought traditional rules no longer applied. To defeat a morally bankrupt enemy, Dulles wanted the CIA to operate in the gray areas far beyond public scrutiny or legal constraint. He was the perfect leader to greenlight MKUltra. The director and his inner circle were driven by specific, urgent anxieties. They wanted immediate, practical solutions to intelligence challenges. How could they make a captured enemy agent reveal their secrets? Was it possible to create a truth serum that would make lying impossible? Could they program an individual, a Manchurian candidate, to carry out an assassination and then have no memory of it? The primary weapon in MKUltra's arsenal was a powerful psychedelic drug, lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD. The CIA became fascinated with LSD's potential to shatter the human ego. They wanted to dismantle reality and rebuild compliance, so they began administering the drug, often without consent, slipped into drinks at bars, given to prisoners as medication, tested on CIA agents. The results were unpredictable and often catastrophic. Severe psychological distress, terror, lasting mental illness in some cases. Beyond hallucinogens, hypnosis. Researchers pushed hypnotic suggestion. Could subjects follow complex commands in trance? They tried creating alternate personalities, implanting false memories, inducing amnesia so a subject would forget. The victims of MKUltra were not enemy spies or foreign combatants. They were, for the most part, ordinary people, drawn from the margins of society where their voices were least likely to be heard. Many were prisoners, men locked away in federal and state penitentiaries who were offered small rewards or promises of better treatment in exchange for participating in what they were told were medical studies. They were a captive population, with little ability to refuse. The CIA saw them as an ideal resource, disposable, isolated, and unable to report the abuse they were suffering. Their bodies and minds became the raw material for the agency's most dangerous experiments, their suffering hidden behind prison walls. The program also targeted patients in psychiatric hospitals and clinics. These were individuals already in a state of profound vulnerability, seeking help for mental health issues. Instead of receiving care, some were unknowingly enrolled in MKUltra subprojects. Doctors, whose salaries were secretly subsidized by the CIA, administered experimental drug cocktails and subjected their patients to extreme psychological treatments. One of the most notorious examples was Dr. Ewan Cameron at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, who used a combination of LSD, electroshock therapy, and psychic driving, forcing patients to listen to looped audio messages for weeks on end, to try and depattern and reprogram their minds. For 2 decades, MKUltra operated in the deepest shadows, its secrets locked away in file cabinets at CIA headquarters. By the early 1970s, the political climate in Washington was shifting. The Watergate scandal had shattered the public's trust in government secrecy and had emboldened journalists and lawmakers to start asking difficult questions about the nation's intelligence agencies. For those who knew the truth about MKUltra, this new era of scrutiny represented a grave and imminent threat. In 1973, with the Watergate investigations closing in on the White House, CIA Director Richard Helms decided to take a drastic and irreversible step. He issued a verbal order to every department within the agency: destroy all files related to Project MKUltra. Helms understood that the program's records contained explosive, undeniable proof of illegal and unethical human experimentation. His solution was simple and brutal: erase the history. Across the agency, officials began the systematic purge of the MKUltra archives. Cartloads of documents were gathered, transported to incinerators, and fed into the flames. Years of research, reports, financial records, and experimental data were reduced to ash and smoke. It was a deliberate and calculated act of obstruction, an attempt to wipe the slate clean and ensure that the full scope of the program could never be known. When investigators finally began to look for the MKUltra records a few years later, they found almost nothing. However, the purge was not perfect. In a stroke of bureaucratic luck, a small number of documents had been misfiled and stored in a financial records building. Around 20,000 pages, mostly detailing the funding and approval of various sub-projects, survived the inferno. These surviving files, while incomplete, would eventually provide the first concrete, undeniable proof that MKUltra had existed. Its mandate was to expose the activities of the CIA, NSA, and FBI. As the committee began digging, they stumbled upon the financial records that had survived the 1973 purge. The committee's hearings were a moment of national shock. For the first time, high-ranking CIA officials were called to testify under oath in public about the mind control program. They admitted to the existence of MKUltra. They described, in cold and bureaucratic language, the use of LSD, the secret funding of university research, the experiments on unwitting American citizens. Their heavily redacted pages offered a tantalizing but incomplete glimpse into the program's depths. One of the most powerful moments came from the testimony of victims and their families. They spoke of lost time, psychological torment, lives permanently scarred by encounters with government-funded doctors. The family of Frank Olson, a CIA scientist who had plunged to his death from a New York hotel window in 1953, testified about their long search for the truth. The CIA finally admitted that Olson had been dosed with LSD without his knowledge just days before his death. The Church Committee's final report concluded that MKUltra represented a fundamental abuse of power and a profound violation of the rights of American citizens. Its revelations led to reforms and the creation of permanent intelligence committees in the House and Senate. The era of the CIA operating with a completely free hand was over. In the decades following the Church Committee's expose, the legacy of MKUltra has continued to cast a long and disturbing shadow. For the known victims and their families, the revelations provided a name for their suffering, but offered little in the way of true justice. Some filed lawsuits against the government, leading to a few out-of-court settlements and official apologies. But for many, the legal battles were long, arduous, and ultimately fruitless. The destruction of records made it nearly impossible to prove a direct link between their trauma and a specific CIA experiment. Their testimony was often the only evidence they had, pitting fading memories against the formidable legal machinery of the state. The story of MKUltra seeped into the public consciousness, becoming a touchstone for anxieties about government secrecy and control. It has fueled countless conspiracy theories, some plausible and some fantastic. The program's name itself has become shorthand for the darkest possibilities of clandestine science. The revelation that trusted doctors and esteemed academics had participated in such horrific experiments led to the strengthening of rules governing human research. The principle of informed consent was reinforced as a sacred and non-negotiable standard. Institutional review boards were established to ensure dignity would not be sacrificed again. Yet the story of MKUltra remains fundamentally incomplete. The 20,000 pages that survived the fire were a mere fraction of the whole. They hint at 149 subprojects and connections to over 80 institutions, but they do not reveal the details. We know what they tried to do, but we will never know the full extent of what they actually did.